Hi, this is Zena Harris.
And I'm Mark Rabin.
Welcome to the tie-in.
Hey everybody.
um,
Wow. I am literally sitting in a forest
you're in a
doing these podcast interviews.
yeah. So, okay, everyone,
Love
just
it.
want to give you a little. So, we're really dedicated to this. Mark's in a park right now. Yeah. But
I'm in a
but
forest.
this in a forest. Okay.
Yeah.
But this in my basement. Oh, there. Oh, wow. See, there you
Yeah.
go. Um, but like so. Every week, Mark and I get together. We have a little chat. We interview people. This week has been full on interview mode
Yeah.
because we've probably interviewed, how did we, like
Six.
six people this week. And this was a hefty
Yeah.
week
Yeah. We're front
because,
loading
yeah.
because we're taking off most of August for travel and Burning Man and everything like that. But yeah, it's been a lot of interviews. I mean, they're going to come out. Newsflash to everybody who's listening. We do pre-record and then we schedule them for, a month or two out.
Yeah.
But it's been so humbling that like just a reminder of just how amazing people are and how tuned in and smart and talented and just making shit happen.
I know. I know. This is the thing. Like this is why like our little venture in doing this podcast is this week has really put the point on it
Hmm.
where it's like
Hmm.
people are out there doing this, doing sustainability,
Yeah.
being creative,
Yeah.
innovative, whatever you want to call it. Like they're doing it. They're bringing people together. They're getting excited. All of that.
Yeah.
Like,
And they're doing it
look,
for like 10, 15, 20
I
years.
mean,
It's
so
not just an overnight
So it's
thing.
not like, this is all a new thing or
Yeah.
sustainability is so new or whatever. It's been going on for a while. The people doing it just haven't had a place to talk about it. They haven't been
Hmm.
asked. They haven't, and some people are, gosh, just starting companies. They've gotten to a point where they've seen the gap, they've seen how they can provide solutions, and they're starting companies to do it.
Yeah.
It's so
And they were
exciting.
brave to do it even 15 years ago. And you think about doing something 16, 15 years ago on a set and saying, yeah, I'm going paperless, or this is what I'm interested in. And this is what I want to see as a director or producer. I
Hmm.
mean, that's brave. That's
Yeah.
bold.
So I guess, look, this is being recorded on a Friday and we're both like coming off of like interview
Yeah.
number six and, you know, uh, like, God, there's life going on. I started the week, Mark, you were in what, Toronto?
Yeah.
And now you're on Vancouver Island, right?
Sunshine Coast.
Sunshine Coast. Okay.
It's not an island, but you need a ferry to get here
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. I wasn't sure where
in
you
British
were.
Columbia. In British Columbia, for all
Yeah.
you
So
guys.
like, Mark's been having a week and my boys, yay, I think I mentioned last week how they were on this big hike. They got back this
Yeah.
week. So it's been, yay, and the storytelling and all the stuff from
Yeah.
that and all these interviews and so inspiring and then work as well,
Yeah. Yeah.
like Green
Day
Spark
jobs.
Group happens, and a lot going on there. And so it just seems like, wow, this has been a week.
Yeah.
And I feel like,
And now
shoot,
there's a lawnmower coming here.
I would be tired at the end of the week, but honestly, I mean, you could probably see it in, or hear it in my voice, but what, at the end of a long week, I am just more inspired at the end of the week that we're all you're doing the right thing. We're on the right track. We just got to keep pushing. I don't know why I feel so excited, but
Totally.
man, it's really cool to hear all
Yeah.
these folks. So
I 100% agree. And that's why we do this, right? As the lawnmower goes by.
I
But
don't hear
that's
it at all.
I put mute. But
Oh,
that's why we do this. Like I was just saying, like that's why we don't have advertisers. That's why we don't have this. It's because we want to be able to say and do whatever the fuck we want to do. Pardon my French, because that's so important, that we have this independent voice. Um,
yeah.
and so that was just brought home today and just reminded over the course of the week.
Mm-hmm.
This needs to be done.
Mm-hmm.
As I look out into these absolutely stunning trees.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I just, also want to say, we don't know who's all listening to this podcast. And if you feel comfortable liking and subscribing, go for it. But if you don't, totally get it. But share it, like tell someone about it. Pick your favorite episode and share it on. Because like this is where, this is how stories spread, right? This is how people get excited. This is how people see themselves in, a guest. This is how people get new ideas for different things. I shared one idea that I just learned this week, and I can't even believe I hadn't even, thought about it. Maybe my team has, and I'm just not, I don't know, in those details. But my
Hmm.
gosh, you'll hear about it on a upcoming episode. So cliffhanger, because we like to do that. But it's just so important to spread the word
Yeah.
and get it out there and have these conversations with people. So,
Yeah.
and just
Rock and roll.
keep it up out there. Keep it
Exactly.
up out there, guys.
Switch it up.
I mean, why not? We are living in a time and we need to just,
Yeah. Love it.
take it on. Thank you all.
Yeah.
We
Thanks for
will
listening.
get to the episode now.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the tie-in. Today, we're talking with Shane Harker, a tenacious entrepreneur and waste diversion expert dedicated to rethinking our approach to waste. In 2016, Shane founded Rethink Resource to challenge outdated waste management systems and lead innovative waste diversion practices across all sectors. With more than 30 years of experience in transportation and waste diversion, Shane's expertise spans circular economies, food waste reduction, green energy, net zero diversion, and data driven waste management solutions. We're looking forward to diving into those topics with you today, Shane. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me, guys. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, Shane, welcome to our little podcast, The Tie-In. Yeah, so let's just kind of start with a little context. So with 30 years of experience, can you tell us a bit about your journey in that?
Sure, yeah. So my dad's a retired truck driver, and I started out in transportation. I actually hold an AZ in Ontario, which is like tractor trailers. So I think depending on where you are, it's a class one. So I still hold that license to today, and had a great mentor there. Sort of climbed my way up, moved around. Spent most of my life in transportation up until 2007, and then I got a call from a recruiter to work for the largest waste hauler in North America. And the ironic thing is, my brother is a City of Toronto retired 33-year City of Toronto garbage man. And when I got the call, I'm like, I don't want to do that. Like garbage is gross. And interestingly at the time, I was a bachelor in a basement apartment, and I didn't even recycle, let alone compost. And I'm like, hey, it's. I was much younger, and I'm like, hey, it's one bag of garbage, and now I'm like, said 8 billion people, right? And so I ended up going to work for them only because they had a 4-day work week, and I was like trying to find back sort of balance. And so we had a 3-day weekend, and I was like, well, it's the biggest and the best, arguably, right? So I went there, and then as I started to learn about waste, I was like, wow, this is like a it's horrible what goes on and how much organics go into landfill. And through that journey while I was there, I learned about anaerobic digestion, which is where you put organics into a tank and it creates biogas like our stomach does. Which you can nowadays they're cleaning that up and putting it into natural gas pipelines, and it's renewable natural gas. For a long time they were using that to generate electricity,
Mhm.
and I was like, why doesn't everybody do this? And this is like the most amazing thing. And so after some years, got married, had a kid, and I was quite successful back in the transportation field. And I'm looking at my son who's 3. And I was like, I had an awesome boss. I worked for a great company. I was very successful. I still don't pay myself as much money as I used to make.
Yeah.
But I
I
was
hear
like
you.
looking at my son and I'm like, what am I doing? Because I know there's this opportunity and like an opportunity to make an impact. And so I quit my job and initially I started a company called Pure Carbon Footprints. And I built a prototype anaerobic digester in my garage. And there's a whole story about even getting insurance for that. I almost blew up my garage because I'm not an engineer. And I was sitting here with this thing, and at the time, I thought that I had the caramel secret, so I wouldn't even maybe have told you that I have a digester without signing an NDA. And you can't get anywhere in business like that. But at the time, I thought, this is like I'm Colonel Sanders here, and I'm going to be a bazillionaire, right? And so I'm like, what am I going to do? And I knew how to move stuff, and waste haulers. That's what we do is we haul waste and we move it around. And so then I started Rethink originally as a brokerage because I didn't want to have employees in trucks and because I did that for a long time. But then I had a couple customers, and initially the first one we used to collect food waste in buckets from an office. It was actually my wife's company that she worked for, and we did this very boutique thing, and we had these like sealable lids. So when the thing was full, you would seal it, and then or if it smelled, you would seal it, and then we would drop off clean ones, and we picked up paper shredding and e-waste and these organic bins for in offices because the big companies handled the stuff outside. And actually my that very first customer, I dumped that in my green bin at home and washed that in my dishwasher. So don't tell anybody in the city of Toronto. And I have a very patient wife that allowed me to do that. And then we couldn't find anybody to recycle the stuff or do the things we wanted to do the best way that I knew how. So that's how we morphed from a brokerage into a hauling company. And in the early days, we rented a truck, came to my garage, picked up carts, drove around the city to the four corners of the city to lose $400 in a day. But because of my experience over time and tenacity, it took about 2 years, but then we ended up selling our house in Toronto, moving outside of the city and investing money into the business. So downsizing life because I'm like, okay, we have something here. And again, a very supportive and patient wife. And it allowed me to sort of, focus on the business. And now we're 9 years later and, we've built the most sustainable, not the largest, far from the largest, but the most sustainable waste management company that I know of that exists in North America.
I love how you kind of built on each kind of element of your experience. I'm curious in that, just from going from a sort of, a very large waste management company and the logistics around all of that and whatnot, and then to thinking about, your a new way of doing things. What are those learnings in between? Like, do you have any fun examples of like, well, this wasn't great, so I did this? Like, I'm just curious because we don't often get to hear kind of nuts and bolts behind the scenes of like these large vendors or, and then, any vendors really.
Yeah,
So
I think the smaller you are, so when you start out, you'll like take anything that'll make money because you need to make money.
yeah.
And so organics wasn't part of the original thing, even though the background or the seed was in my head about this. And it was like, hey, can you do this? And so
Mhm.
the answer is always yes, because somebody's going to pay me to do this, right?
Right. Yeah.
Um, and so I think that, what we've learned along the way is that we can handle and do handle any waste for anybody, but it's how do you do it efficiently? Because especially now, in a big portion of our customer base is restaurant and food service, and we do a lot of work in the film industry, and so everybody is looking at budgets, right? And so how do we justify this stuff? And in particular in restaurant and food service, like I have really good relationships with my customers, and margins are very thin for restaurant and food service. And so we have to be innovative in order to do that. And so the buckets was a good idea, But then silly things like you lose the seals, and then people started sealing these buckets because they were like sealable out of the alley. And I'm like, I have no idea. Like I have 200 buckets that have gone missing. And so
Mm-hmm.
you do things to solve problems, but then it creates other problems, and then you can't deliver that. So you have to continue to innovate so that you're not losing money, but still bringing the solution. At a certain point, we had a truck that collected. So the system is we swap carts, right? So most people know like the wheelie cart bins that you have either residentially or commercially, and so we drop off empty ones and we pick up full ones. And so
Okay.
we do that so that we don't have to, so we don't compact it, which allows us to actually rethink waste as a resource. And currently we're hand sorting that stuff. But
Mm.
for a while, we were dropping off the carts, picking up full ones. So on one truck, we would pick up waste, recycle, cardboard, organics, and then somebody said, "Hey, can you collect my oil at restaurants?" So we did that with those buckets. And then we actually put a vac tank on there and started doing grease traps. So one company would do what two or three companies did, and six trucks into one truck, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we've now evolved a little bit where we're taking the grease and the oil off there, and it's I guess what I would say is sometimes when somebody wants to do something sustainable, like when somebody they're like the people that I deal with, say in the film industry, like they care so much and they want to make this thing effective. You say yes, and then you figure it out. You want to drive down costs. People are like, oh, well, can we store everything in a big 20-yard bin and then you pick it up? And I'm like, sure. And we pick it up. And then it's been there for a week and it's the middle of the summer. And now
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
sorting through like maggot infested,
Yeah.
Ugh.
No
and
way. Yeah.
so, I think that's that's a really good one, where you run into those problems and you just have to
Oh,
sort of
yeah.
pivot or change a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Shane, is there so just so your customers will pay for this removal. Um, then is there a higher value use? Are you creating compost with the organics? Are you putting into a biodigester? Are there other sort of like, because that's always the question, right, that I have around waste. Is like once it goes in the blue bin or in this, like, you hear all these stories of it. Well, most of it gets burned or just thrown in the garbage or this and that. What's actually happening behind the scenes?
So it's a great question. And the answer is it depends. So
Yeah.
it depends on, is it your residential bin? Is it a commercial bin? Who's
Mm.
the hauler that does it? So I'm going to share a little secret with you guys and nobody else, but there's some shady characters in the waste management business.
No
Yeah.
way.
Yeah,
No
there's a
way.
couple. And actually, it's funny when I updated my Facebook, whatever, how many years ago, and it's work for that big company. Uh, my friend was like, "Oh, hey, you're in the waste management business. It's like the mafia or something like that." I'm like, "Are you crazy? This is like a $20 billion company. They could buy the mafia." So it's a big business, but there are some shady characters involved in it.
Yeah.
And so back to the answer is it depends. And so what's happening, and I don't know all the provinces that are on it now, but we've switched from your municipality doing your recycling to extended producer responsibility. And so like Coca-Cola, that imports the Coke or makes it here or whatever, whoever makes that packaging is responsible to recycle it. So it's like they're paying for the recycling of that. And then that's tracked. And then if, let's say they sell, I don't know, a billion Cokes, in a year in Ontario, I'm in Ontario, then they have to pay, I don't know, probably like 1/100th of a cent or whatever for that. And then there's tracking on who actually recycles it, and then if they don't meet targets of recyclability, they're now fined under this new. So this has been transitioning in the provinces. But what that's designed to do is to push companies to help make things more recyclable. So there's a misnomer that if I put something in my municipal blue bin, that it's not being recycled because everybody saw that marketplace where only 9% of plastics
Yeah.
have been recycled. And then
Yeah.
they're shipping it over to like Malaysia or something. And these poor kids, and they're like, so I can tell you that in Ontario, I work with a company called EFS Plastics. So we pick our stuff up. Right now, we're hand sorting. We're working on AI robot sorting. We'll talk about that later. But we recycle a lot of plastic in Ontario. And they're always looking to buy plastics, threes through sevens, and they can't get enough. So we're like,
Hmm.
certainly there's people that are doing that, but I would say your blue bin is pretty safe. Now on the commercial side, there's lots of companies that say they're doing stuff and they're not. I know of a company that put it on their invoice because when markets go down, they can't make money on the plastic and the metal. So they put on their invoice, it said your recycling may be transferred out of transfer. Nobody knows what that is. Like they should put there in big bold letters, like we're actually dumping this in
Yeah.
the landfill,
Uh,
right? And so
Mm-hmm.
probably some lawyer or whatever said they could get away with that. So that does happen. But I can tell you that there's a lot of great players out there that are actually diverting it, and there is a lot of misnomers out there. But I can tell you in Ontario, and they're importing from other provinces. Plastics in particular are not all bad, and they are being recycled a lot of in Ontario.
yeah.
Did
Mm-hmm.
that did I answer your question?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I guess in terms of the bio waste or bio, materials,
Organics.
compostable organics. Yeah. Where does that go? Does that go to compost or is it like biodigesters or again, just that's
So
yeah, trying
so
to figure
again,
that out.
that depends. What
Yeah.
we do is we have three options. And so one of the things we've been doing for a number of years is we've been picking up brew grains from craft brewers. And so our model is a truck will go to so Aveling Brewery in Toronto was the first one that we did. And so we drop off the carts. So they'll put brew grains in some of those smaller green carts. They'll put food waste from the kitchen in some of those green carts, and then they'll have waste and recycled cardboard. So our truck will pick all of that up and bring it back to our facility. So we have a bin that the brew grains go in, and then that'll go off to a farm to feed the cows, right? So as we've evolved, it's like how do you use the waste at its highest value, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when it comes to organics, the highest value is to feed it to humans, right? So we're not in food rescue. It's not good to mix edible food on a waste truck, anyways. So the
Yeah.
next step is how do we feed it to animals? Or what we've started doing some of is black soldier fly larvae, whereas you feed the organics to it and they'll eat anything. And then before they turn into, there's a great company in Halifax called Oberland. The company we were working with here locally is not around anymore, but they freeze the larvae before they turn into flies. And then it's this high protein, and then that goes on to feed chickens and
Hmm.
fish. And then the next level would be anaerobic digestion
Yeah.
or compost. And we went through this process last year of like full carbon accounting. And so there's a lot of companies that are chasing renewable natural gas because there's value in it.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at the carbon accounting perspective, it's better to go to compost. So in the film industry, we had done a pilot years ago with a burger shop where we swapped out all the packaging. And then we got into the film industry in 2020, and it was like 6 months into COVID, and they went from like a cafeteria style to like individual packaging.
Mm-hmm.
And so we introduced this composting model where we supplied them compostable packaging. And the idea behind it was is if somebody didn't eat their entire meal, they could just throw the whole bag into the green bin. And then that would go off to compost. And actually, kind of a neat thing is that first production that we worked on, we brought compost back from our composter, and then we made custom labels for the production in compostable bags and gave them out as wrap gifts.
Yeah. Oh, that's fun.
Yeah. So it on the organic side, it's highest value to animals. We do anaerobic digestion, and that's for like contaminated packaged stuff. I'm a big advocate of compost though, because it's actually a little bit higher value than anaerobic digestion. And with that compostable model, it makes it easier to handle. And then it puts all the nutrients back into the ground and it's a carbon store, which is better for the environment and a whole bunch of
Mm-hmm.
other stuff I learned about farming. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, I'm curious, because, we'll hear stories about, and you mentioned earlier, maybe shipping, stuff to other countries or whatever to use. I'm, really interested in the circular economy and keeping materials in flow and keeping materials in use locally and that sort of thing. So I'm just curious, I guess in Ontario or maybe even, in the greater GTA, what's happening? Are materials staying locally or are they going elsewhere? Like, how does that work?
So I think that there's a lot of circularity in Ontario. Um, really, geography is a big thing, right? And so in Ontario and Toronto specifically, and in and around the GTA, like this is the biggest market in Canada. And
Yeah.
so, like in BC, I know this because we're starting to do a bit of work out there. So I know that a lot of stuff is shipped overseas
Hmm.
just because, and I haven't done the math on it. We've done the math for carbon accounting. So for instance, if something goes into landfill or goes in the waste stream in the Greater Toronto area, 80% of the commercial waste, so not like Toronto owns their own landfill for the municipal stuff, but
Hmm.
80% of the commercial waste gets trucked to Michigan. And so you've seen those big trailers with like seven axles on them and they carry
Yeah.
35 metric tons. Well, it's a carbon ton of fuel to get the stuff to Michigan to the landfill and then it comes back empty. So that round trip is a carbon ton just in transportation, right?
Hmm.
And so when it comes to, say, Vancouver area, some stuff will be shipped to overseas markets, but there might not be a plastic recycler or something like that there. So it actually makes sense. And I haven't done it, but where we're going with everything is like what makes the most amount of carbon sense, right? Because it doesn't have a lot of carbon if you put it on a shipping container. And some of these boats have, I don't know, 1,000 containers on them. The example that I like to use is back to this EFS and the plastics is so what we're talking to a lot of people about now, like plastics get a really bad rap and we
Hmm.
should reduce it
Hmm.
for sure. Single use plastics, anyways. We
Yeah.
can talk about reusables after, which is there's a whole thing we want to work on there. But so we bring the stuff back to our facility. We hand sort a lot of it. We bring the stuff to EFS Plastics, which is Listowel, Ontario, which is about an hour and a half outside of Toronto. They then recycle it back into the raw material. They actually own a company, Exiplast, down in Sarnia, and they ship it down there, and then they turn it back into a new product within Ontario, let alone Canada. And so it certainly does exist. And the other thing about organics, which is the highest impact. Like diverting organics from landfill is the highest impact that you can have. So any organics for sure
Yeah.
100% are processed locally. And so, we can literally show you the difference between, our yard is on one side of Toronto, right? And so when we ship the brew grains to Guelph, which is 99 kilometers away, we're tracking the amount of carbon based on the diesel fuel to transport it there, but the value in the reduction by not creating other food to feed to those cows versus transporting it to landfill and it turning into the greenhouse gas that goes up
Yeah.
into the
Hmm.
environment. So organics again is the single biggest thing you can do by diverting it because you're not transporting that long distances because it's so heavy and it's not a it's not the circular economy per se because it's not something tangible you can touch after unless you're doing compost. But most of us are not doing that. It's going to the farm and it's turning into the tomato that we buy, right?
Yeah.
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 This a book I read many, many, many years ago, Cradle to Cradle, William McDonough and Michael Bronner. I mean, they kind of set the stage for these sort of closed loops. And then they wrote a book 10 years later after that called The Upcycle. Um,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah, are you when you're looking at this, are you taking in some of these sort of theories and putting them in practice? How are you looking at it from a more I guess from the whole top to bottom, bottom up, because there's a whole world here around circular economy um, in value chains that we're starting to talk more about and more openly.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, are you looking at that from I don't know, maybe a theoretical or academic level or in practice?
So, so I've listened to both of those books some time ago.
Yeah,
Everything
they're
I'm
old
working
now.
on now is really about we've grown the business over 9 years, and now it's set. We've kind of got to figure it out. So the reason we're getting into all sorts of industries is because now we figured out what is the best way to have the most positive impacts. When I started this, it was like I wanted to create impact for my son, right? And
Yeah.
so people use the phrase, "Hey, I'm saving the world," or "You're saving the world." We're not saving the world. We're saving humanity,
Yeah.
right? The
Right.
world will
Yeah.
wipe us out and be okay, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we're like a virus, and if we don't smarten up, then it's going to wipe us out. It's
Yeah.
a little audacious to say, "Hey, we're saving humanity," but that's essentially what we're working on now. Selfishly, I'm looking at my son, and I did it for my son, right? it turned into this thing, and it's for everybody. So everything I do now is looking at scale, and that's to bring more value. So yeah, I don't remember those books too clearly, but everything that we do now, right, is comes down to the carbon impact of it. And
Okay.
so it may make more sense. So let's say EFS closes. It may make more sense to run plastic to the landfill in Michigan, than to ship it overseas,
Yeah.
especially if, what is happening in some of these countries that are unregulated, say, is they're cherry picking the best plastics and they're burning the other stuff. So if that's in fact happening, so we look at it like, what is the best carbon value of that? Of course, we have to respect, the dollar in doing it or whatever. So everything we focus on is just scaling that and calculating the best carbon and making that happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I bet you're swimming in data related to this, um, which is interesting because, in my, I don't know, 10 or 12 years working in the film industry, we have had a really, have gotten good at calculating things like the carbon impact of transportation, electricity, um, fuel, accommodations, like those, we've got a real good handle on that, as an industry. But what we don't have a good handle on is, is the carbon emissions of the materials, the embedded carbon, how much we would save if we reused, things like wood or other types of materials. Um, and and then, when they do go to the landfill, what's the implication there? So I'm curious how that has evolved for you, in your work, and you know what the potential, that you see is for getting that data, accurately into the hands of, folks in the film industry or in other industries that you're servicing.
Yeah, so it's we haven't, like, we went through last year doing full carbon accounting for everything we do. And it's not like there's models out there and softwares and stuff like that that give you roundabouts, but it doesn't work if, there's local landfills in proximity to Vancouver, right? I think there's one that some of the stuff goes south. But again, in Ontario, so if you're using one of these metrics or whatever, it doesn't ask you, like, are you in Toronto? Is it municipal waste or is it whatever? And they don't know that you're spending that carbon to get it there. It
Hmm.
will ask you what the composition of the waste is. So we've done all of that to get particular about where is it going, what are we doing it, what is the savings for it.
Hmm.
Actually, and I'm very proud to say that we're going through third party verification now, so we haven't made it public yet. But we divert so much waste from landfill, we're actually carbon negative. Um, and so even though we have some diesel trucks, we're 30% electric, but we have some diesel trucks. And so all of our effort has been spent on the back end. And I will, anytime a customer's like, hey, can you come for a walk with us and talk to us about how we can reduce it? So we haven't done anything in, like, if you use a new 2x4, what is that? Like, what is that implication? Like, what is the carbon use on the front end? We
Hmm.
focus all on the back end because there's so
Hmm.
much, and then we
Yeah.
use, like, sort of groups of commodities like plastic, organic, wood, and so that's how we look at it from the back end. But traditionally, up until what we're working on right now, we've given a diversion report. And the funny thing about that is everybody's telling me when you start to talk about carbon accounting, people get it and they understand it, but they're like, "But it gets too, like," so back to the data thing, like there's spreadsheets like this. And I've got a guy who, his name's Yash. Like, the spreadsheets this guy builds, unbelievable. Like, I have the concept here, but I'm like, hey, Yash, can you do that? And I'm pretty good. I know, like, if that, then this formula. But Yash is the guy. And so all of those calculations are there. So when we start talking about it, we're trying to produce a diversion report that has carbon calculations in it. And that's to scale the business because the corporations want that,
Hmm.
right? But the average person just wants to know that we're doing a good thing, right? So I don't know if that answers your question. So we have that data on the back end and what we can share it. And one thing I'll tell you that I think is really neat is we've done some. So not only do we do set pickups, location pickups, but we will do, like, we do 40-yard construction bins here as well. And so my facility, like they'll handle wood waste. And currently, what happens is it'll go to, they won't tell you, they'll say like the average wood waste in Ontario goes to energy, right? And it's call it bioenergy, but essentially they're
Mm,
burning it, right?
Yeah.
yeah.
So, but we've been exploring back to the compost piles behind me. As I've learned about this journey, it's like, how do we get nutrients back into the ground? I don't know if you guys have ever heard about biochar, but I went to
Yeah.
the US Biochar Conference last January or February in California, and like this stuff is like steroids for the soil. So we're starting to look at that kind of stuff because yes, burning it for energy is better than putting it in a landfill. But using it as nutrient dense fertilizer source is a higher level, right? So
Hmm.
those are the things that we've started to explore to bring more value. Sorry again, I went off on a little bit of
Yeah.
a
No,
It's
it's great.
so when so like that leads me to my next sort of thought around, harnessing this data and technology. Uh, seem like the waste management industry still seems a fairly brute force kind of industry. Are you using technology to help make your job better, identify the various waste streams or value streams?
yeah.
What are we seeing in the future that you can disclose to us, of course, but what are we seeing as the future of waste management and technology?
So what we're working on pilots right now for AI robot sorting. We've developed our entire own software, and it's pretty rudimentary. Like a driver will go to a site and they'll pick it up and they'll weigh the container. And so they'll weigh the container and then they'll report to a customer. So they have this much recycle, this much cardboard, this much food waste, whatever, and there's calculations on that. But humans are humans and people make mistakes, and so some of the data was going in wrong. So we found out that our diversion report reporting was not accurate. So then we started looking at whenever, and this is actually so to if for anybody out there that's trying to figure out if their waste supplier does like the right thing, first you should always ask for like a tour of their facility. And if
Mm,
anybody ever says, "Oh, it's proprietary," which has happened to my competitors, like competitors in this region have been like, "Oh, it's proprietary." And I'm like, do they have the caramel secret or the KFC recipe? Like
right.
it's waste, right? And so they won't show you that's a problem. But we found our own selves that the data going in was not great. So what we started doing is calculating, and waste is all handled by weight. And so there's tickets. When we bring it to a digester, we get a ticket that says organic waste, whatever it is. If it's landfill, like whatever it is. So we started doing the reporting based on where it was going. But back to the data for the front end for the customer, how does that help them? So we built like an AI prototype where it scanned the waste and it counted like the bananas and the loaves of bread.
Mm,
It was for a grocer that we did this pilot. And so I'm not a developer or an engineer. I found these guys that did this in India for me. It's
mhm.
unbelievable. Like I've been really good at finding and getting stuff done on the cheap, as you're
Yeah.
bootstrapping out of your garage. And but now we're evolving and we're a bigger company now and we're making a couple bucks. So we're now looking at we're evolving our software. Um, but we're working with a company called Waste Robotics out of Montreal. And so they have just these arms, like, and you can go on YouTube and check them out. And so they're starting to put these into MRFs, which is a material recovery facility, which sorts the recycling. And so um, we're pitching to companies to do a boutique service. So take a coffee chain and we'll say, hey, we'll come and pick your waste up solely. And if you go to all compostables, but you have a plastic bottle, the robot will pick it out and everything will go to compost. So that's the big technology that we're focused on. And then anybody that gets on that program, which would be the same as the film industry when we're doing those locations pickups, is for a long time we were doing the compostables, but we're trying to do a pilot with Friendlier, which is a national reusable container program. And we've seen their stuff come in. So I'm like, hey, why don't we work together and do this? And we don't have the robots yet. It costs $1 million for this setup. But what we're doing now is we're doing pilots and we're doing hand sorting to video it so that we can put the business model together. But that's the technology, is to use the robots to do this sorting. And then one of the early film sets we went on, we did this amazing signage, and it was like the bins were blue, green, and black, and the bags were color coded, and the signage was the best signage I've got. And somebody's talking and they're walking, and this woman's eating a banana because they asked me to come on set and consult and like help figure this out. And the woman stops and she looks, right, and she's like, I guess it was overwhelming. The signage was so good, and she
Mm.
threw the banana peel in the black bin. And people
Mhm.
are busy, so what we're trying to do is create a model where everything goes into one bin and the robots are going to pick out the good stuff. And if it's fully compostable, or in this case of reusable, it'll capture all of that. And the data suggests that we can get like, 98, 99, 99.5% diversion. And the stuff that wouldn't be is your local non-compostable coffee cup that somebody walks to set with,
Yeah.
or into your QSR and throws it in the bin. It's the contamination from outside that wouldn't fit the model.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm curious because there are just so many different types of materials, and I get that, maybe you can, robots can figure out what that is, maybe scan it and, understand what the material composition is or whatever the case. But one of the things that I have seen over the years, and I am just curious, like, you know, the recommendation is, and this is small stuff, so forgive me for getting into some nitty gritty here, but like, I think this is the stuff that confounds people and what's the right advice. So, for example, broadly speaking, one might say, oh, um, you know, purchase compostable cutlery and all the materials in food service, for example. And then you've got essentially something that can go in one bin, in the organics bin, right? But come to find out, you can purchase, several different types of organic cutlery, for example. And how does one know if it's actually going to degrade appropriately or if it has microplastics in it that, will just further contaminate the soil? Is it such that this kind of thing gets raked out because you can't really tell, and then that just gets into landfill? So not only have you spent money, on getting the good stuff, but the good stuff's being raked out anyway and going to landfill. So you're not actually making the impact you thought you were going to. So can you help us understand that process a little bit?
Yeah, that's a fantastic, like an absolutely fantastic question. And so, first of all, I want to say that I've always been a big fan of compostables. From a Listen, not everybody is going to bring their reusable mug. I can tell you that I have, I went through like on Earth Week a couple years ago, and I'm like, if I don't have, I think I committed to donating $20 to something if I bought a disposable. So I ended up spending no, I think it was $40 because to buy the container was $20. So I'm like, I would save money if I buy the container. All of a sudden we've got like, I'm forgetting because I've got like 30 containers at home, because I forgot one for an entire month. Um, and people are busy. So the idea behind the compostables is to, Starbucks sells something like 8 billion coffee cups in a year, right? And so, how do you make it for the mainstream? Because not everybody is going to use the reusable. Now, in Toronto, if you look on the waste guide, compostables go into the garbage because their green bin program goes to a digester. And so when they bring, the truck picks it up, compacts it, and they bring it there. And they have what's called a hammer mill, which squeezes the organics out of it. So it doesn't know if it's compostable or if it's a regular plastic fork. So it squeezes it out and goes to landfill. But I would have the same argument for, say, an electric vehicle. So people are like, oh, electric vehicles, if your power is diesel or if your power is coal, then you shouldn't buy it. Well, chicken or egg, right? So buy the electric vehicle. At least you don't have emissions at the source, and then clean up the infrastructure, right? And because the infrastructure behind it costs billions of dollars, right? And so it takes time for that stuff to get rid of and go through. Why I would say, and I guess I would back up in the case of like a film set, reusables are a perfect model. If you
Hmm.
have the right vendor, so we're pitching this pilot with Friendlier where they'll have a friendlier bin there. But I know stuff is going to end up in the wrong bin. So we'll do the collection and then we'll bring it back to them. So you have to start with sort of the end in mind, is like, how are we going to handle this stuff in that scenario, right? Um, but if you go back to general use, you're out and about and whatever, everybody is, it's funny. You go to most places and plastic straws are a big no-no, but they're in a fiber cup with a plastic liner and a plastic lid, but there's a compostable straw and they suck. Like a lot of them suck and they wear out. But why we should use compostables as opposed to a plastic, even in Toronto where that it's not composted, is when we use a plastic, especially these QSR high volume models and stuff. That stuff is not recycled plastic. That comes from virgin oil that comes out of the ground,
Hmm.
and so at least with a compostable, it's a renewable. Now the oil industry would say, oh, but if that goes in a landfill, then it's going to create biogas, which is true, but and I haven't done a full cycle analysis on this, life cycle analysis on it, but it's from a renewable source. It's not from oil that comes out of the ground. It will create biogas, and then that puts it into the stream, which then allows maybe when the digester is retiring, Toronto will start the compost stream. And there are lots of places like Vancouver area that has a compost stream, right? So I hope that answered your question. It's if it's not, if it ends up in the landfill, at least it's from a renewable resource and it's not virgin oil that's coming out of the ground.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it just goes to show that there's not like there's no easy answer to this kind
Yeah.
of stuff. And
Yeah.
so,
And we haven't even
uh,
touched microplastics, which
I know
that's probably it for a
it's
different
probably a
day.
no different conversation.
Different day, different
There's
day.
a lot. There's a lot. Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay. So, I'm curious to get your perspective on this. We ask our guests, kind of this one of the same question. If you were to create a playbook of key principles, of your work, let's say, what would be like number one on your list?
People look to me for answers. Um,
Yeah.
and back to the thing is somebody's going to put it in the wrong bin, right? And
Yeah.
so a lot of haulers throw everything into the landfill because guess what? People don't put stuff in the right bin. And there's not
Yeah.
a technology yet that's prevalent enough, like this AI sorting thing. Like it won't do everything. We're talking about a specialized, like only work with certain streams, certain customers kind of thing.
Yeah.
So they're right in a certain respect, right? So I mean, it sounds kind of cheesy, but reduce is always the first R,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So reduce the waste. And if you're looking at a business, whether that be, and this is happening now because in corporations, like if you're a publicly traded corporation, you have to report on your emissions, and then they're demanding that companies give your scope 3 emissions, and that's where all of our
Throw the
stuff is
waste.
coming
Hmm.
from, right? It's actual real stuff for that full legit carbon accounting. And so I don't, and again, there's so many things in so many industries and all that stuff. I would say personally, if you care, look in the mirror and focused on reduction. I'm, I don't know. I've diverted so much waste, but guess what? Like I go through drive-through. I eat McDonald's. That's my guilty pleasure. I love McDonald's, right? Like, and it happens. Life happens, and people get busy, right? And
Yeah.
so, what I believe I believe that the corporations should be held accountable for this stuff. And so, like, oftentimes, we'll quote stuff, say in the film industry, like, hey, we don't have a budget for that because it normally costs this. I'm like, okay, but it's all going to landfill, right? And so, what should happen is, and eventually I think we're getting there, is that whoever owns that production is going to have to report on all that. And if they don't do the thing, then it's going to cost them. It's going to cost them money not to do the math. I don't know if that necessarily the diversion, but the best carbon accounting, because we know that the biggest is the fuel and the transportation in the film industry, right? So I've sat, I remember sitting on a production meeting and they're like, why should we go with your services? And I said, well, it depends on what you want. Like, do you want the maximum carbon value? Then get, not generators, but get replacement for generators,
Yeah.
batteries, if you can't tie in or something like that. But then you also have to think about the PR aspect of it. And if people have recycling and compost bins at home and you don't do it
Yeah.
here, then that's the issue. So sorry, that was, I don't think I answered
Just
your question, but
No,
there's a
no.
lot of layers.
reduce the waste. This is it.
Reduce
Yeah.
the waste. I mean, that's pretty key. But also to your point, just to kind of round it out there, um, yeah, this is what, this is what I mentioned earlier. Like we do know what the high emissions are on a film set, for example, and where the high
Yes.
impact area is, because that's what we've been measuring, but we haven't been measuring the waste and the embedded carbon and all that. So when we get good data on that, come to find out, it might be right up there. And that,
Mhm.
like we need
I
to
don't,
focus
well,
on that too.
only because we've done all the carbon accounting. So it's pretty simple, right? So it's don't quote me on this exact number. It's either 7.8 or 8.6. 2.86. Yeah, sorry. 2.78 is the direct carbon. 2.86 is the CO2e. So I think it's like nitrous oxide and whatever. Like we
Yeah,
got
yeah.
really down deep into this stuff. So for every liter of diesel you burn,
Yep.
right? So film industry is renting trucks, right? These Hino 26-foot box trucks. Those are the same trucks that we use to do our pickup, though we have an electric one coming. So for every liter that you burn, it's 2.86 kilograms of CO2e. The fuel is easy to accommodate because I know, and I've also picked up film waste. Sorry, I shouldn't say for sure. I know we didn't handle it, but I know that there was a set on a farm that was built that lasted 3 months, and they tore the whole. It was they built the whole town. So that one I would argue maybe
Yeah.
so that one may have been, but in general, especially when you have like a multi-season or something like that, I don't think that the waste would. Though I would tell you where we could focus on that is food. And this is this pilot we're trying to get off the ground. If anybody in the Toronto area wants to do this, I was walking on the set. There's a woman, Louise Pollard. I don't know if you guys have talked to
Yeah,
her.
we know Louise.
Amazing individual. So we're walking on set. And she's just like, how do we actually do the thing? Roll up your sleeves, like, no nonsense. How do we actually do the thing? It was like, hey, Louise, what if, like, when you go into McDonald's, you can tell I like McDonald's. So what if you go into McDonald's and they have like the calories on there? I'm like, what if they had the carbon footprint of the meal on there?
Mhm.
So we've also done some pilots with some caterers, and some caterers we work with don't have a green bin program at their place. So we have a caterer that we work in the restaurant and catering business that's on board to do this. And
Hmm.
we took three recipes, and most people know that beef is bad, but we have like a vegetarian meal, a chicken meal, and a beef meal. And the idea is we will send it in reusable containers, not buffet style, and what we found is because when we're picking the waste up and we do the hand sorting, is a lot of people don't eat the entire meal, right? And
Hmm.
so that's why we like compostables, because if they throw the whole bag in, it's all compostable. But it goes in reusables, and so Friendlier is on board to try this. We have a caterer that's on board to try this. We're going to deliver the meals in an EV, but we're going to give them a week of picking their meal, because during COVID it wasn't buffet style, and we had like a spreadsheet where you picked your meal,
Yeah.
and it's going to go individual meals, and then they pick the meal. But then a week later, then we do a little education piece on the carbon accounting of it, and then see how much we can drop down the carbon footprint just of the meal. And by going with individual servings, then we would reduce. And this is kind of crazy because I'm the garbage guy on the back end, and I'm like, I keep getting asked these questions. So all of a sudden I'm like, you got to start at the back, but then you got to go back to the front to
Yeah.
stop the stuff, right?
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
pilot is this: we have a caterer on board, Friendlier is on board, Too Good to Go, which is food rescue locally in Toronto, is on board. We're going to deliver the meals via EV truck. We're going to give them the choice after we give them the option, right? And we give them the education component on it. And then we're going to pick all the waste up on EV. So to be the absolute most sustainable catering model that existed in the film industry, and we'll get the full carbon accounting on what's actually possible to
Yeah.
happen.
So you're
Mhm.
looking for a production to test this on.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
In the
All
Toronto
right.
area.
Thank you. Yeah. Can you tell folks where to find you? Like social
Yeah,
media,
so
website?
the website is rethinkresource.ca. Everybody always says resources. In fact, my
Yeah.
wife is like, it's resources, and I'm like, no, I don't know if it's, anyways, it's resource, no S on the end. So rethinkresource.ca. We're starting to get a lot more active on Instagram, and so it's at rethink.resource. resource, and we're starting to post a lot of stuff there on LinkedIn, Shane Harker, or Rethink Resource. And yeah, that's where you'll find us.
Very cool. All
Love
right,
it.
Shane. Well, thank you so much for talking with us about all of this.
Thank you guys so much. Appreciate it.
Our designer is Aaliyah Kane. Music is by Peter Chapman. Social media is by Picnic Social. Our producer is Colin Miller.